These days, the smartphone market is all about market share because technology has reached a plateau in a lot of ways. And how did Samsung get here? Well, part of it is by launching their bleeding-edge Galaxy S24 Ultra and offering a generous trade-in program to get this into as many people's hands as possible. Then they take a lot of those features and over a few generations, distill them down into lower price series. I mean, look at their sales from 2023. The A series continues to be their top-selling phones worldwide. The S23 Ultra hasn't even made that list. So when we look at its successor, the S24 Ultra in this case, it seems like the aspirational phone that many people would use as a reference point when it comes to making their purchasing decision. You see, I've been using this phone for the past 4 months, and I wanted to share my experience with you guys, basically skipping all the hype and just diving into the real deal. From cheap $200 phones to Pixels and iPhones, the Ultra is the most advanced one that I've used so far. So let's see what's great about it and also, what could use some fixing in future models. Now, from the outside, there isn't a whole lot to talk about this phone when compared to the S23 Ultra. The design remains largely unchanged, although they've made some minor adjustments to the materials, like opting for titanium to create a lighter frame. They also offer a variety of colors, some of which are exclusive to their online store, and they've ditched the curved screen for a flat layout, and you also get slightly smaller bezels. But at the end of the day, this thing is still a big glass slab with sharp corners, and honestly, it's not the most comfortable thing to hold in one hand. I prefer phones with rounded corners like the Nothing Phone 2, which is similar in size to the Ultra and costs half as much and feels way better in the hand. It's a case where form takes over function, and I hope Samsung takes note of that. Now, initially I thought that operating it with one hand would be a nightmare considering its size, but I've got to give it to Samsung for including one-handed mode. So essentially this can be triggered by swiping down right by the app drawer, and this basically shrinks the screen's active area, making it more accessible. This feature alone has been a huge lifesaver for me. Then there is the absence of MagSafe, but honestly, that's more of a me problem than Samsung's problem because I've invested in a lot of MagSafe accessories during my time with the iPhone, and not having them available was a bit of a pain, but thankfully, there are third-party cases out there to fill that gap, but it is worth noting that they do add to the overall bulk of the phone, so choose wisely. Now let's talk about this display. I'm not going to bore you with the list of specs here, but from a high-level perspective, it follows the same recipe as the last few generations, with a few minor tweaks. So first off, they've cranked up the brightness to a remarkable 2,600 nits, which is quite impressive considering the limitations of OLED technology. To put it in perspective, laptops with OLED panels often struggle to reach 500 nits, making this display a game changer, especially when using this thing outdoors or even while traveling. On top of that, Corning's Gorilla Glass armor significantly reduces reflectance by 75%, resulting in an even more immersive visual experience. This is actually one of the first things that caught my attention when I started to use this phone, and let me tell you, the difference is quite noticeable, especially when compared to the iPhone 15 Pro and the Pixel 8 Pro. Now, while some may dismiss it as gimmicky at first glance, once you actually get to experience this, going back is a bit of a struggle. Now, if you're planning to add a screen protector on top, this feature is completely useless, and I kind of did pay the price for that. As you can see, it did end up scratching up the screen. Not happy about that. You see, these hardware improvements are nice to have, but it's not a necessity for everyone. I want to circle back to the aspirational concept I mentioned earlier. In a few years, I guarantee you that these extra perks that you see with these flagship models would eventually trickle down to the A-series phones. I mean, look at where we are right now. We went from 60 Hz on the Galaxy A51 to 120 Hz with higher brightness levels and better durability on the current A55. Something to think about. Now, I must admit, the larger 6.8-inch screen makes watching movies and shows much more enjoyable, and the fluidity with 120 Hz is excellent. However, I did notice that the touchscreen sensitivity on this phone seems slightly lower compared to some of the other phones that I've tested. Light taps often fail to register, and scrolling just felt out of sync with my thumb at times. Despite this thing boasting a 240 Hz touch sampling rate, there are certain aspects that just felt off. Interestingly, I'm not the only one experiencing this. Others who have upgraded from the S21 Ultra have also noticed similar issues. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Also, Samsung sets the display resolution to Full HD Plus by default for power efficiency gains. So if you want to fully utilize the capabilities of this $1,300 smartphone, just make sure you switch it to Quad HD Plus in the settings tab. It won't affect battery life that much. The ultrasonic fingerprint reader on this phone works beautifully. It's actually gotten faster with the recent updates. Unlike optical readers, this thing's subtle and it doesn't blind you at night. It works all the time when I try to unlock it, which I love. Call quality is great, no issues with reception. The physical buttons also feel nice and tactile, and I do like their position for easier operation. Now, on the performance front, I didn't encounter any hiccups with this phone, and it's actually quite a refreshing change compared to the Pixel 8 and the 8 Pro that I reviewed recently. Editing my raw photos on the Ultra was pretty smooth, although processing the 200 megapixel photos still takes about 5 seconds, but do keep in mind that that doesn't impact the camera experience. There's no shutter lag when capturing fast-paced subjects. The HDR processing works in the background and it's seamless, unlike the Pixel 8 series, which is just known to be slow in that regard. It's actually really ironic when you think about it, because Samsung seems to have nailed the optimizations with hardware and software better than Google. I mean, sometimes there are occasional delays with YouTube Studio taking a while to load. The comment section, Instagram messaging sometimes just takes an eternity to load. The grid layout also doesn't expand fully to the navigation menu. Now, these things don't happen frequently, but it is worth noting that third-party apps on Android have always lacked that final polish compared to iOS. But overall, it's been a pretty smooth sailing for me. On paper, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 does bring some noticeable performance gains over Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra, but in the real world, you really can't tell the difference, guys. Maybe on the gaming front, but if you're holding onto a flagship phone that's 2 or 3 years old, you're really not missing much. Now, this next bit's actually not been talked about that much, but there is an ongoing issue with the S24's ability to reliably lock onto and maintain connection with the Russian GLONASS constellation. Now, for starters, GLONASS is a global navigation satellite system utilized for both military and civilian users to obtain real-time position and velocity information. We use this every day on applications like Google Maps, for instance. This issue was actually brought up by one of our team members who just enjoys hiking and encountered difficulties with his Galaxy S24. His phone basically struggles to accurately register the exact location. Other users on Reddit have also indicated movement even when they are stationary. I did run GNSS Logger on my S24 Ultra to compare to my Pixel 8 and the Nothing Phone 2. And yes, the phone does struggle to stay locked onto GLONASS. So if you have an Android phone, I actually encourage you to run that test. But Samsung, if you're watching this, just please fix that. Thank you. All right, S Pen. It's actually been a staple feature since the Galaxy Note series, and I'm actually glad to see it on the Ultra phones, but personally, I've never found this particularly useful. But that doesn't mean that it won't be beneficial for you. Some utilize it for media playback controls when it's docked for charging, like using air actions to adjust the volume levels or play pause. It also serves as a shutter button for large group photos, but most importantly, its ability to take notes with the screen off, quickly signing documents, quickly jotting down measurements from your contractor if you're renovating your space, or even keeping track of scores during games with your friends and family. It adds value, and I get it. But I don't see it as a necessity. I should also point out that oftentimes I've noticed the S Pen just pops out by accident. Now, luckily, it's just a release button, but the rest of it's actually held by a magnet. But it is something to be mindful of. Battery life has been pretty solid. Samsung has stuck with the same 5,000 mAh battery for the past 4 generations, so you can count on this device lasting for more than a day. In fact, I managed to stretch it to almost 3 days on a single charge with moderate usage, and this includes like watching TV shows, scrolling through Instagram, browsing the web, using maps and messaging. Of course, everyone's usage may vary, but for me, even on light work days where I'm mostly glued to my computer, this phone doesn't give me nearly as much anxiety as my 15 Pro. I've traveled with it to Japan, shot a ton of photos and videos, and I was thoroughly pleased with its efficiency. But let me remind you, phones that cost a fraction of the Ultra can still deliver comparable results. They might not be the fastest or have top-notch camera performance, but if endurance is what you're after, there are more affordable options available. I mean, sure, you may miss out on fast charging or wireless charging or reverse wireless charging for that matter, but that's a small price to pay for in the grand scheme of things. But that being said, the Ultra's 45-watt charging is pretty neat though. I mean, I was able to juice it up from 0 to 60% in 30 minutes. but I had to get a separate adapter for that. I just find it silly that they don't include it in the box, especially for the price you pay. Speaking of pay, we do have some bills to cover, so let's hear from today's video sponsor.
Question, why is it so cold in here? Well, I got new coolers installed. Turns out they're a little too good. They're meant for computers, you know that, right? I got them in every room. Hey, the price is just too good. I guess the large VRM fans help with cooling. Yeah, plus the pivoting connection hoses are wonderful. I do love the styles and different sizes too. The new Arctic Freezer 3 AIOs. Please use on CPUs only. They are specifically optimized for LGA 1700 and AM54. Check them out below. All right, have fun with your freezer.
So all these were shot on the S24 Ultra in 4K, and one standout feature for me was its remarkable image stabilization. This isn't limited to just one lens, it's actually consistent across the entire camera array. The footage almost gives the impression of being shot on a tripod, yet it was handheld. Details are sharp, the dynamic range is balanced, and the zoom capabilities are extraordinary, guys. I mean, being able to zoom into a soccer game from the top of a Tokyo tower is just simply mind-blowing, and it's a testament to the advancements in camera technology. If you're someone who loves documenting life in video, the S24 Ultra is the ultimate tool. It's actually comparable to what the iPhone 15 Pro can achieve. Though I did wish if Samsung could include the option to shoot in log. Basically, it's a flatter profile preferred by cinematographers for creative post-production work. After all, this is an Ultra phone. But that being said, there is Pro Video mode baked into the app for granular control for ISO, shutter speed, white balance, and focus points. This is something that the iPhone lacks. What about photos? Well, if I were to describe it in one sentence, what you see is not what you get when you're shooting with the S24 Ultra. Let me explain. Here's a screen recording of me capturing this beautiful sunset in Tokyo. I frame it, hit the shutter button, go to the gallery to view the results. It takes about 5 seconds to process, and the HDR processing just destroyed the natural contrast, boosted the shadows, and just made it look atrocious. Keep in mind, this is out-of-the-box settings. Here's another example. I'm shooting this cute capybara, but this time in 200 megapixel mode. I hit the shutter, wait for some time to process, and oh my. It just dialed up the contrast, desaturated the greens, and just took away the natural look of the image. This is what it looks like in real life, as opposed to this. I tried to investigate this issue, and to my surprise, I'm not the only one with a lemon. A lot of people have addressed similar concerns as well. I tried to dig into the settings and I tried to minimize the amount of optimization, but I've had no luck so far, guys. And this is with the latest update installed at the time of making this video. So at the end of the day, photos coming out of the S24 Ultra offered a mixed bag of results. While some images exhibit aggressive post-processing, others are vibrant and sharp with really good dynamic range. There are some cases where noise gets introduced even with plenty of lighting, and in some cases the photos just lack contrast. However, the one common element throughout all of these photos that you're seeing here is the phone's ability to capture incredible detail. The upgrade to the 50 megapixel periscope lens is refreshing. I love shooting with this compression. If you know me by now, this is my favorite focal length. There's of course the useless 100x zoom feature, which I barely touched. You could get some moonshots that are fake thanks to AI, but don't fall for that marketing BS. Shooting with the main 200 megapixel sensor provides impressive depth of field, although Samsung defaults to bidding it down to 12 megapixels for storage efficiency. In low light conditions, the main and telephoto sensors perform pretty well, but the ultra-wide-angle camera struggles with dynamic range in certain scenarios. Portrait mode functions well overall, although I will mention that it is slightly overexposed in some cases. The selfie camera delivers pretty good performance, but I should point out that the Pixel 8 series does offer a slightly wider depth of field. Switching to Pro mode enables raw shooting, resulting in significantly reduced post-processing. As you can see, there's less sharpening around the text, and the texture on the wood looks natural, and that unlocks greater creative control over edits. Each raw file averages around 30 megabytes, and with that much information in hand, I went to town with my edits in Lightroom. And I must say, the results are quite satisfying. The GNG files, in my opinion, are far superior compared to the stock ones that you get straight out of the camera, which is, again, pretty disappointing for those who are seeking for a simple point-and-shoot experience. Now, this camera app could use some polishing. Samsung just tries to include every possible feature, even ones like a dedicated mode for food photography, which might leave users questioning its necessity. I also had a hard time distinguishing between expert RAW and pro mode when trying to capture raw photos to explore the camera's capabilities. I just feel like simplifying the layout could eliminate these hiccups. Like a simple toggle in the main viewfinder to enable or disable RAW mode would be greatly appreciated. Again, this is the pro photographer in me that's speaking out as opposed to a consumer, so you could probably disregard that. All right, so let's talk about software experience. It's the last piece of the puzzle. So with this phone, you're in for a unique journey through Samsung's One UI. So as expected, you'll find a slew of pre-installed apps, a handful of Microsoft ones, and a bunch of other random additions that you might never use. Cleaning this clutter took me some time, especially when I was transferring content from my Pixel 8, but once you pass the setup stage, there are some standout features in One UI that I've grown to appreciate. For starters, the quick settings tray is neatly condensed with all of my frequently used controls. Google, and please take note of this. File management system is top-notch. It's one of the things that I admire about Android. Plus, there's the ability to customize wallpapers using generative AI. Speaking of AI, there are some cool new additions baked into One UI 6.1. By the way, this applies to all the previous Samsung phones running this particular version. So first up, we have Circle to Search, which can be triggered by long pressing the home button. All you have to do is circle, highlight, or tap anything on the screen, which will then bring up helpful search results. It's pretty fast and accurate. Photo Assist comes in handy for editing photos on the go. It's very similar to Google's Magic Eraser. You can reposition or remove subjects in the photo. It takes about 5 to 10 seconds to generate the final result. Keep in mind that you do need data for this. Instant Slow Motion uses AI to artificially generate additional frames from a regular 24, 30, or 60 frames per second video. It works pretty well when you're shooting with the main sensor, but once you go 5x or zoomed in, you can start to see the artifacts, especially around the deer's head in this case. Now, there are other notable features, including Live Translate, Interpreter, Note Assist, Chat Assist, all powered by AI to enhance various aspects of your phone's usage. The translation stuff is pretty cool, but using everything else felt a bit intrusive. I mean, I don't want to send hashtags to people over text messages. I mean, look, I don't know where you stand with the advancements with AI. It's scary. It's probably going to replace our jobs sooner than later, but for now, 80% of the AI stuff baked into this phone are features that I guarantee most people won't even use. And did I also mention that all the AI features are actually featured by, or they're disabled out of the box, and you need to create a Samsung account to use them. So there's that. Now, Bixby is still here. It's still present. No, yeah. But you can use Google Assistant if you're invested into that ecosystem. I feel like these things shouldn't exist next to each other, and I can't help but wonder what the potential chaos would be when Google Gemini Nano rolls out into these phones later next year. Are we going to have a showdown of 3 AI models fighting for control? Only time will tell. Samsung DeX is pretty impressive, and I was surprised by the amount of work that can be done by simply connecting this phone to a monitor. Multitasking is a breeze with split screen mode, and I even managed to complete most of this script using DeX. However, it's not without its flaws. There are some software bugs, particularly with YouTube Player, which could use some polishing. Also, it would have been convenient if Chrome could automatically switch between desktop mode and mobile mode when using DeX, rather than require manual adjustment every single time when you plug it in and unplug the device. I just feel like this could also be a really good addition to your living room setup. With a simple connection to a TV and a Bluetooth keyboard, you're pretty much set. It's not going to replace your computer, but it's just there as an option or a feature that, it's cool. It's cool. So the S24 Ultra, it's big. It's got all the fancy hardware that you'd anticipate in a flagship. The AI features are pretty cool. It's an impressive feat of engineering, no doubt. But we've been caught in this cycle for the past few years. Smartphones hardly have anything left to prove these days, guys. Every year, whether if it's a Galaxy device or an iPhone or a Pixel, it's just another iterative update to what you might already have in your pocket right now. And as the title suggests, there are things from this phone that I'd like to see trickle down in some of the affordable phones that might come in the next few years. Features like the anti-reflective coating on the display, maybe a faster fluid experience, wireless and fast charging, better software support. Samsung actually announced 7 years of updates starting with the S24 series, but what about the S23 and the S22 and the affordable A series phones? You see, the S24 Ultra is not perfect. Samsung wants you to think that this sets the benchmark for the competition to follow, but It needs a lot of fixing, starting with the aggressive post-processing. I mean, that needs to stop with photos. I hope they also address the GPS issues and the lower screen sensitivity. I also think that it's overpriced. This should be a $1,000 phone. I mean, if you're looking to upgrade, explore the trade-in options, but remember, there are other phones currently in the market that cost half as much as this and can do 95% of what this thing can.